Hello artists! This is an introduction to Zentangle. Zentangle is simply meant to be a meditative form of drawing. Zen in itself is meant to mean calm and you're relaxed. We'll often listen to some soothing music, maybe some ocean sounds when we do this activity, but this activity is meant to clear your mind and help you just be in the present moment and feel calm. So before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about what Zentangle is and how it started. It started with a couple, and the story goes that the husband was trying to get his wife's attention, and she was doodling so much and creating these beautiful, intricate drawings that she found herself in a state of what's called flow. And flow in art simply means that you are so focused on what you're creating, especially when it's these tiny little detailed designs, that time just doesn't exist. You are forgetting about what's going on around you. You're not thinking about what's happening for dinner tonight. You're just simply in the moment and almost in a meditative state. So there are a few things that you need to create a Zentangle. Traditionally, you would need these square pieces of paper, which are called tiles. You can purchase the brand name Zentangle tiles, and you can find those on Amazon. We're simply just going to use some paper. So we're going to use our sketchbook for this project, and you would also typically, if you were really into Zentangle and using the appropriate materials, you would buy some Pigma micron pens. So these are really fine tip markers, and I'm not sure if you can see, but this is labeled as a 3, and the bigger the number, the bigger the marker. So something like 005 is the tiniest, and it's just this microscopic little marker point. So that's how we get these teeny tiny little designs. And the more time you spend doing something repetitive and tiny details like this, you're more likely to find yourself in that trance or in that state of meditation. So while you would typically in Zentangle use tiles and micron pens, we're simply just going to use paper from our sketchbook and our handy dandy skinny Sharpie for this. So I'm going to have you start by opening up your sketchbook to a clean page, and you're just going to need your Sharpie. Everything else set to the side. You can also see that I have some different Zentangle resources. There are lots of books on Zentangle that show you different patterns and designs. We are using this project to learn about the art element of a line, because everything in here is made of our basic shapes and lines. So we're keeping it simple. This is not meant to be something stressful or difficult. So if you're feeling stuck on different ideas, you're welcome to look some ideas up online. I also have a playlist of Zentangle ideas on YouTube that you are welcome to look at for different ideas. So there are tons of resources you can use if you enjoy doing this and you want to do it at home. So here we go. I'd like you to open up to a clean page. And because we're using our Sharpie, we know that that is likely going to bleed through this sketchbook paper. So you could do this a few different ways. You can tear out a piece of paper, and you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to tear out a piece of paper, and I'm actually going to draw on top of the back of my sketchbook. So this I can bleed my marker onto. I'm not worried about it getting messed up. If you want to keep your sketchbook paper in without tearing it out, you might just want to tear out a blank page to keep underneath, okay? And maybe always just keep this as your scrap paper that gets all marked up. So I'm going to do this, all right? Typically we would start with a square piece of paper, and I'd have those all cut and ready for you, but it's not a big deal if it's rectangular. But typically we would do this on a tile, and the tile is square. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw kind of a basic square as if this were my tile, okay? In Zentangle, things do not need to be perfect. This is meant to be handmade. It's meant to look like it's all organic, and we're not going to use any rulers. We're not going to worry about if things aren't perfect. This is meant to be relaxing. Just go with the flow, and the message here is if you make a mistake, either find a way to cover it up or make it into something else, or just let it be there. Let it be a mark of that one time that things didn't go as well as you wanted them to. All right, so on my blank page, I have my tile. Okay, my tile is just my square piece of paper, and this is the setup for our Zentangle. Traditionally, you would start a Zentangle with anchors. So anchors are basically just a dot in each corner of your tile. Okay, they can be small, they can be a shape if you'd like them to. Let's see, I had some that were like swirlies in the corner, so it doesn't have to be just a circle, just a dot. If you want to have little squares for your anchors or a different shape for your anchors, that's totally okay. So I'm just going to do a dot almost like it's pinned on a chalk or on a, you know, on a cork board. All right, so I have, what's this called? This would be my tile. Then I'm going to start by drawing my, what are these? Anchors. Correct, great job. And then I'm going to connect my anchors with a frame. Okay, again, this can be whatever you want it to be. It could be a wavy line, straight line, curvy line, zigzag line, but I'm basically just making a frame. So I have my anchors and my frame. Connect all four sides, okay? So your Zentangle will be on the inside of your frame, and what's on the outside is just white space. So with all this dark marker and coloring in, that white frame really helps everything pop out. The next step is to create strings. So strings are just lines that go through our space to break up the area into different sections. So these can go however you want them to. I like to have some bigger spaces, some smaller spaces. Okay, something like that is perfectly fine. So here's a couple more examples. Here's this guy. I like to do a loop-de-loop in the middle. Okay, again, these could be straight lines, zigzag lines, just enough to break up your space. Okay. Then, as you can probably tell, in each of our spaces, you are going to come up with a different tangle. A tangle is simply the design that you come up with to put in that space, okay? So we're going to start simple, right? This is a project based on our art element of line. So start with some lines. Choose one of your spaces and just start to fill it with one type of line. So it could be straight line, zigzag line, diagonal, vertical, horizontal. It could be a wavy line. I'm going to start with kind of these scalloped line. And part of how you get into that state of flow or the meditative state in drawing is through repetition. Just taking one thing that's simple, like a line, and repeating it. Normally, you would not be talking, and you'd just be listening to some soothing music, okay? And I'm just going to keep going until I fill that entire space with that one line, okay? Now I can go back and make this more interesting. You always want to think of how you can make something look more interesting, more detail, more color, decide if it needs to be a lighter design where more white space is left, or if you're going to color in the background behind your shapes, okay? So after I fill a space with a type of line, maybe I'll think about a shape that I could add, or another type of line that I could add. I think I'm going to add some circles in here. Okay, so If you feel like you have filled one of those spaces with enough lines and shapes and maybe you're out of ideas, then you just move on to the next space and start with a different type of line or a different type of shape. When we get into this a little bit further, we'll talk about value, which is the lightness or darkness of a color. The one color we're working with in this project is just black and white. So we will change the value based on how much we color in or how much we leave blank. All right, because the goal is to try to have some darker designs next to lighter designs so that they all pop out. When we have too many designs that are similar, like these are pretty much half and half here, they kind of get lost and they blend into each other. So we'll talk about how to separate our darker designs from our lighter designs and place them so they all stand out. So that's it. That's your setup. You start with your tile, anchors in each corner, connect your anchors with a frame, and break up the space with strings. Inside those spaces, then we start to add our tangles. So right now, I'd like you to just open up a sketchbook page and go ahead and set this up, get started. If you don't want to do it like this, maybe you make it bigger, maybe you make 4 on your page. You decide how you want to start this and how you want to practice. Go ahead.